Welcome back in. Today we're going to be discussing some of my favorite breakout players for 2024. Let's go ahead and get started. First up, I don't know how this player is going where he's going, and that's Samir White. RB 27, 93rd overall. This doesn't make any sense to me. Yes, he had a limited sample size last year of really only 4 games. He had 104 carries, 451 yards, and 1 touchdown, and he had 15 catches for 98 receiving yards. Over the final 4 weeks of the season, when Josh Jacobs was out, he was third in yards after contact per attempt, 17th in yards per touch, 15th in explosive run rate, and ninth in expected fantasy points per game. He averaged 21 carries and just over 3 targets per game. Zero reason in my mind he should be going RB 27 with these types of numbers. This team is going to be very similar than it was last year. Antonio Pierce is still the head coach of this team, and they still have an identity of really wanting to run the football. They brought in Gardner Minshew at quarterback. This is a team that's going to really lean on their defense and really want to pound the rock. And I think Zamir White is in for a big opportunity share this year. And really, all they did was they brought in Alexander Madison, which I don't care about. He had the opportunity last year in Minnesota, did nothing with it. He is just not the same player he was, and I'm just not worried about Alexander Madison. And past that, they drafted Dylan Lobby in the 6th round. Now, I do think Dylan Lobby could mix in as the season goes by as more of a pass catching back. Somebody that plays more third downs. But Zamir White has the early down work on lock goal line opportunities. So to be able to get somebody that can average 20 to 25 touches per game, especially at this range, is ridiculous. I do expect his ADP to rise. Next up, let's move over to Tyjae Spears, RB 37, 121st overall. There's a lot to like with Tyjae Spears this year, despite the Titans signing Tony Pollard over the offseason. Spears handled 34% of the opportunities behind Derrick Henry last year, but he was uber efficient, ranking 5th in yards created per touch, 5th in breakaway run rate, 4th in juke rate, and 11th in yards per route run. He was also heavily involved in the passing game with a 14.7% target share. We know Tony Pollard will likely be the 1A in this offense, but I expect Spears to be the 1B right behind Pollard. Tony Pollard, I think, as we know, is not a guy who's going to handle 70-80% of the opportunities. I think it's much more 55-60%, where Spears comes in and gets 40-45% of the opportunities. And if he can remain as efficient as he was last year, I think Tyjae Spears has really a lot of standalone value, and he should at the very least be going inside the top 36 running backs, and somebody that I really like getting my hands on, especially we do not see a return of the explosiveness that Tony Pollard showed 2 years ago. Next up, let's move over to Kendre Miller for the Saints. His season was absolutely ruined by injuries. He suffered an MCL injury in his final college game and then re-injured the same knee in the preseason. However, he did flash a little bit of the upside that we saw in the season finale with 73 yards on 13 touches and a touchdown in that game. Now, this is an offense that has aging running backs. Alvin Kamara is entering his age 29 season, and Jamal Williams look like dust. I would not be surprised if you see a little bit less Alvin Kamara in the run game and maybe they utilize him more as a pass catching back, third down back. He is getting up there in age. Jamal Williams did absolutely nothing. Surprising, he scored 0 touchdowns after all the touchdowns he scored with Detroit. I do think Kendre Miller has a real shot this year to take over as the number 2 running back in this offense at the very least. And so I do think he also holds some standalone value. Next up, let's move over to Ty Chandler. This also doesn't make any sense to me with what his ADP is. Coming off the board at RB 47, I don't really understand that, while Aaron Jones is being drafted at RB 18. Vikings signed Aaron Jones over the offseason, which should mean a sizable role in the offense for Ty Chandler, because Aaron Jones is 29 years old and he's never been somebody who's handled a large workload. Much more of a guy who stays in the 50 to 60% range. I don't see that changing at all for Aaron Jones this year. And so I do think Ty Chandler is going to carve himself out a really nice role. And he flashed the ability to be a contributor on limited opportunities last year. He finished 18th in yards per touch and 19th in yards created per touch last year. And so I really like Ty Chandler, especially at RB 47 prices. I will pass on Aaron Jones and give me the much cheaper running back in Ty Chandler, who I think is going to have a pretty comparable role as what Aaron Jones is. So really like Ty Chandler as more of a late round option. Next up, Antonio Gibson, little blast from the past here. Not necessarily, and he's not a second or third year guy, but I did want to include him here. RB 51 or 165th overall. I think this is another running back that has standalone value, for the Patriots. And I think it was a time for a change of scenery in Washington. But last season, he was relegated to a pass catching back. He only received 65 carries over the course of 16 games. He did see 11% target share, and he was 6th in fantasy points per opportunity. He was also pretty effective on the ground with a 5.8 yards per touch, which ranked 4th highest. And he was also 2nd in yards created per touch. And he ranks 1st in missed tackles forced per opportunity since 2020 among all running backs. So I think Antonio Gibson is actually a pretty good player. One thing that has never been in question has been his ability to catch passes. He ranked 10th in yards per reception, 7th in routes run, and 22nd in yards per route run last year. And so I do think he has standalone value. I think he's going to be the pass catching back. I think he's going to mix in. And if anything were to happen to Ramondre Stevenson, we know Antonio Gibson can handle a full workload. He did it when he was with the Commanders previously. And so Antonio Gibson, I think, is a really nice little sleeper option. I don't necessarily love the Patriots offense, but I still think Antonio Gibson holds standalone value as well, especially in PPR format. So I didn't really want to include much of the rookies here. We'll get into that later. There is some rookies I really like, especially Jalen Wright for the Dolphins, and as well as I think Blake Corum. I think you can make an argument for Trey Benson. You can definitely make an argument for. So there's definitely some rookie running backs. Some other running backs I could have talked about. Roshan Johnson is another late round running back I really like, but as we go forward, we'll talk more and more about some of these late round running backs. I just kind of want to go after the guys that really stood out to me on the first pass. So next up, let's move over to wide receivers. And here is how I am going to talk about a rookie wide receiver, and that's Lad McConkey for the Chargers. Wide receiver 46, 94th overall. He is 6 foot, 186 pounds. He ran a 4.3940. Now, this is a player that wasn't a mega producer, but that's a lot of the profiles from a lot of these wide receivers in this upcoming rookie class. Not a lot of production from these guys. His best year was really 2022, where he had 58 catches for 760 yards and 7 touchdowns. Last season, 30 catches, 483 yards, and 2 touchdowns, but that was mainly because of injuries. Now, one thing I'll say about Lad McConkey, and something that holds true year over year over year, is these guys that play in the Senior Bowl and they get rave reviews in the Senior Bowl that go on to have really solid NFL careers, and that was Lad McConkey. He was the talk of the Senior Bowl and how well he looked. He made defensive backs look absolutely silly. He said his best comparable was Cooper Kupp. Lad McConkey stands in an excellent opportunity here. His competition for targets was Quentin Johnson, who looks like a bust, Josh Palmer, who's really just about as average as you can get in terms of wide receivers, and then DJ Chark. They brought in Will Dissly, Hayden Hurst. They also brought in as well. So this is a great opportunity. Now, this is an offense, I will say, with Jim Harbaugh coming in as the new head coach, that is going to be much more run heavy early with Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, the guy they brought in here, as well as Kamani Vidal, who they drafted this year. But there's still enough opportunity, and this is still an offense with Justin Herbert, who is one of the best quarterbacks in the league, top 10 quarterback in the league for sure. Not something I'm going to want to draft in fantasy this year, but Lad McConkey could end up seeing 120, 130 targets this year with all the wide receivers that are gone, with Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Austin Eckler all gone from this offense. So Lad McConkey is a slam dunk pick for me. Jameson Williams next up. Wide receiver 49, 96th overall. He's had kind of a weird start to his career. He was suspended for 4 games last year and missed most of his rookie season because of the ACL he suffered really late in January. He's fully healthy going into the offseason. He's entrenched the number 2 wide receiver in this offense with Josh Reynolds gone. He is super explosive. Could see a lot more manufactured touches to get the ball in his hands. Now, this is an offense last year. The Lions were 9th in pass plays per game. So there is a lot of target competition there with Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, and they also still have Jahmyr Gibbs, obviously. So, but Jared Goff was 6th in deep ball completion percentage and 8th in play action completion percentage last year. Really spells really good things for Jameson Williams, who only had 24 catches, 354 yards, and 2 touchdowns last year. There's been a lot of conversation, especially Dan Campbell just recently came out and spoke about Jameson Williams and said that he has been by far the most improved player so far in this offseason and OTAs and everything else that he has seen. So hopefully we get a big breakout year for Jameson Williams. All right, next up, let's move over to Khalil Shakir, wide receiver 54, 113th overall. I don't understand this ADP either. Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis are both gone. They did bring in Keon Coleman in the second round and also signed Curtis Samuel, but we're talking about a massive amount of targets that are gone. 41% of the total team targets are gone from last year. Now, I don't think obviously all those are going to go to Khalil Shakir, but it's not hard to project 120, 130 targets for Khalil Shakir, who last season had 39 catches, 611 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. He was 33rd in yards per route run, 14th in yards per reception, and 19th in target separation last year, and 2nd in fantasy points per target. He is very good with the ball in his hands as well. He is one of the best yards after the catch guys. He was 4th in yards after the catch per reception last year. And I just think he is in for a big step forward this year as Khalil Shakir. And I don't understand the ADP wide receiver 54 at all. This is still an offense with Josh Allen at quarterback, and I think he stands to be the wide receiver 1 in this offense. Keon Coleman, I think, could be that guy in the future. But right now, I'm not going to put that on him, especially as a second round pick. He is somebody that had his own red flags coming out, was not a mega producer either in college, but somebody that has some upside, somebody they like. But Khalil Shakir, to me, I think is the very easy guy here to peg as the number 1 wide receiver in this offense. It's never been Curtis Samuel. It's never been his game. I think Curtis Samuel is a really good number 3 wide receiver, but Khalil Shakir this year just blasphemy that he's going at wide receiver 54. I think he could end up being a solid wide receiver 2 this year. Next up, Jahan Dotson, and I already know, I can already hear the groans. Yeah, I everybody that drafted him last year thought he was going to go off. He didn't. A lot of that was bad quarterback play, bad coaching. He is currently now coming off the board at wide receiver 63, 130th overall. So much more palatable to be able to draft somebody in this range, where it's much easier to be able to take some shots on Jahan Dotson. And I actually really like this Commanders offense this year with Jaden Daniels now at quarterback. But last year, Jahan Dotson had 49 catches, 518 receiving yards, had 4 touchdowns. He also had a 13.8% target share, and 39% of those came from the slot. But he had a 67.5% catchable target rate, which was 67th among all wide receivers last year. Really poor quarterback play killed him. Sam Howell ranked 19th in true completion percentage, but 32nd in deep ball completion percentage and 25th in red zone completion percentage last year. Now they have gutted this entire system. Dan Quinn is now the new head coach, and Cliff Kingsbury is now the OC. Expect for a fast-paced offense in 2024. The Cardinals, with Cliff Kingsbury, ranked top 3 in pace in 3 of the 4 seasons with Arizona, meaning we should see a lot of volume here in 2024 from this offense with Jaden Daniels at quarterback. So I think Jaden Daniels is a massive quarterback upgrade from what they had last year. And so I actually really like Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson to really have big seasons in 2024. So I have no problem. I mean, the ADP is completely different from where Jahan Dotson was going last year. He was going as like a top 40 wide receiver. Now he's going wide receiver 63, 138th overall. Lastly, at wide receiver, I want to talk about Jalen Tolbert. Wide receiver 104, absolutely free. 22 catches last year, 268 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. Get it, did absolutely nothing. Michael Gallup is now gone. Michael Gallup saw a 14.5% target share and ran 64% of the routes. Cowboys were also 7th in pass plays per game. So there's a lot of volume to go around here with this offense. And with Michael Gallup gone, I think Jalen Tolbert is easily the number 3 wide receiver with this team. They didn't really do anything in the draft. They spent a 6th-round pick on a wide receiver. They brought nobody in free agency. They tried to sign Zay Jones. That didn't work out. He went to Arizona. So Jalen Tolbert, there's some buzz going around him. Brandon Cooks been working with him all offseason. The number 3 wide receiver here. And if something were to happen to an aging Brandon Cooks, then Jalen Tolbert immediately steps into the number 2 wide receiver on an offense that is going to be top 10 in pass plays per game this year. So Jalen Tolbert is somebody that I absolutely love taking some shots on. 3rd-year wide receiver from South Alabama. Lastly, let's move over to tight end. I just want to talk really quickly about one tight end. He didn't even play last year. He missed all of last year with a hamstring injury, but an absolute athletic freak in Jelani Woods, tight end 46, 6'7", 253 pounds. If you're familiar with RAS scores, he scored a perfect 10 on RAS score. He is one of the most athletic tight ends we've ever seen in NFL history. And in 2022, he hauled in 24 or 40 targets for 312 yards and 3 touchdowns. And in the games he played, over 60% of the snaps, he averaged over 10 PPR points per game. So he also ranked 14th in yards per route run, 8th in yards per reception, and 13th in fantasy points per route run. So I do think there's quite a bit to like here with Jelani Woods. Kind of a late round target at tight end. If you're going to wait on tight ends, you don't want to spend early draft capital on a Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, Kyle Pitts, guys like that. And if you really want to wait and take a shot on somebody, maybe even your tight end too, Jelani Woods is that guy. I really like the upsides here if he can stay healthy. There's been a lot of really good reports about him already in OTAs. Anthony Richardson is back within this offense. And so I just think Jelani Woods could really break out this year. That being said, there's a lot more guys we could have discussed, believe me. But I really just want to, I kind of went down. I want to go through some of the guys that really stood out to me. I think is real obvious values. Things are going to change as we get to training camp in about a month and a half. So keep it locked in here. We got a lot more content coming. Redraft season is pretty much here. At least we get at the beginning of it. We can start talking about this stuff, and it's not too early anymore to talk about this stuff. So we got player profiles coming. A lot more other videos like this coming. So be sure if you haven't already, hit that like and subscribe button. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.